I reckon we should get started, you guys. And hi to Nina from Glasgow as well, who's studying MA journalism at Sheffield. Just so you know, in case anybody wants to join us after, they totally can. It's probably easier if they just watch us through Facebook. And this video is also going to live recorded on our Facebook account and on YouTube. So fear not, this is going to be here and we will repeat these sessions as we go along. So let's get started, shall we? I'm going to share my screen with you guys just to walk you through a couple of the stuff. And this is stuff that I'd always taught at the University of Kent, right? So just to give you a little bit of background, my name is Laura Garcia. I am the co-founder of PressPad, and we're originally from Mexico. My background is in photography and television production and film production, that kind of stuff. I've always been a camera person. For the last 5 years, I was a lecturer at the University of Kent, at the Centre for Journalism. Shout out to CFJ Kent. And now I am the training and support manager at a nonprofit called First Draft, and we work with journalists from all over the world to try and fight back disinformation and do research on social media and all that kind of stuff. So we're going to do another webinar about that at a different time. But when I was at CFJ, part of my job was to do these kinds of employability events and talk to students about how the hell do I apply for jobs and what do I have to do and how do I stand out, and working really closely with people to get them into the industry and into kind of like the pathway of what they were interested in. And I still kind of do it. I have former students who call me up before they have job interviews or to read cover letters or to have a look at their CVs. And I'm really happy to do that for anybody who wants me to kind of be that sounding board. But I'm going to walk you through my main learnings from doing that job with people at the CFJ, and also from my own experience in applying for jobs, right? So all the time that I was a master's student or when I was doing my PhD in teaching, and even now, I've always been a freelancer. I've always been a side hustler. So I know what it's like to try and get into the industry. The job that I'm in now, I applied for last year. So it wasn't that long ago that I've gone through this process myself. And I can speak to that lived experience and also to the experience of my students, right? And in my experience, there are 5 things you need to ace in order to get a job. And if you master those 5 steps, then your probabilities of getting a job in journalism, right, or in the media or the creative industries increase quite a lot. And I'm going to talk to you about numbers 1 through 3 on this session. And then we can do another one about 4 and 5, because those are a little bit different. So the 5 steps to ace job applications in journalism are, and this is kind of like exam time, right? Take out your notebooks, kids. Do some note taking. Understand the hiring process. Build your brand online, which is incredibly important. Know where to find jobs. Write killer cover letters and applications, and sharpen up your interview skills. And if you manage to kind of master all of these 5, or be aware of where your strengths and your weaknesses are in all of these 5 areas, you will do an amazing job. Let me walk you through it step by step. How hiring works. So this is like truth time. The job market is changing. I don't know about you guys, but the way my parents got into the different jobs is that you got a job, you went to uni or to school, you trained, you got a job, you got into a company, and then you went up, right? It was vertical. You kind of grew within that company or within that industry, and people didn't change jobs that much. And that was expected in how things worked. The job market has completely changed. We no longer go just straight up in one company. You go up by side stepping and doing little things and changing, and it's completely normal for people to change jobs during their career. And it actually is a little bit expected. Like if I looked at someone's CV and they were in the earlier part of their career and they've stayed somewhere for 5 years, I would ask why, right? Hold on a second. I need to admit someone into the conversation. There we go. So that's the first thing to keep in mind, that we have to change that mindset. And I don't know how old your parents are, but when I started applying for jobs, and I'm not that old, my parents insisted that this is how it worked, right? That it was vertical, that I had to find the one golden job that would let me grow into my professional career and just scale it up and up and up and up and up. And it meant that when I started looking for jobs, I felt incredibly pressured to find this kind of Goldilocks job, and it had to be perfect, and it had to be the thing that I was looking for. And it had to have room for me to grow and all these different things, right? And then I felt this pressure to kind of like grow within that industry, in that specific first job. And the job wasn't working like that because the job market has changed. And now that I've understood that in my head, that I've made that switch, that the job market is actually kind of like this, and it's more about side hustling to find the right job for you. And now this doesn't mean you have to work for less money than your work, or that you should work for free. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that your road is going to be a little bit more like the arrows on this side than just straight up to the industry. And that's the first switch that you need to change in your head, and that you need to have these conversations with your parents and the people that love you so that they understand that too. Now, the actual hiring process, the way I see it, has 3 steps. So first is you apply the application. The second is, and that is a filter where someone from HR or even an algorithm is the very first person that sees your CV and your application materials. And this is the hardest and the most important step, you guys. I went to a seminar probably like a year or 2 ago with some people from Cambridge who research how people who receive job applications interact with those materials. And they said that the first person who looks at your CV gives it between 6 to 10 seconds to decide which pile you go on. From the 500 applications, whether you go on the maybe pile or on the no piles. 6 to 10 seconds, you guys. That's all you've got to make an impression. And sometimes that's not even a person, right? Now there's a bunch of jobs where you apply online, and the thing making that first decision is an algorithm. And you have between 6 to 10 seconds to impress either a person, or God knows how little it takes an algorithm to consider which pile to put you on. This is the hardest step. And it's the one that is unfair for many reasons. And it's not the only, some people are starting to hire in different ways. I'm not saying this is absolutely the same across the board, but for the most part, this is how hiring works. And the second part is when your applications are actually reviewed by a human person that cares about journalism, that has subject knowledge, right? So a lot of the times the first person who looks at CVs is someone who's been outsourced from an HR company, who might not be a journalist, who might not have the subject matter to kind of understand the nuance and the pain of putting together an interactive map versus not putting one in your portfolio, right? That second reviewer is going to have a little bit more subject knowledge, and that's where your portfolio really matters, and where making your work easy to find really matters. The third step is the interview. Once you're in the door, it's more about in-person skills, and that's why that's a separate conversation we need to have. But the hardest point, the hardest step in all of this is that first hurdle. If you manage to get yourself across that first hurdle, you are way on your way to, or your chances of getting that job increase a lot. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So how can we increase your chances? How can we play the game as it is stacked right now so that you can succeed? I'm not in any way condoning some of the unfair practices in hiring or all that kind of stuff. And we can have that conversation separately. And there's people like us at PressPad finding really hard to change that process. I'm just saying, as the game is stacked now, I'm going to show you how you can play the game as best as you can to improve your chances of getting a job. So there you go. That's the first one. Now, other things to think about when you're approaching job hunting. Job hunting is a job in and of itself, right? And that's probably one of the very few silver linings that you guys are probably going to get out of being in lockdown, is that you have more time. You can just sit in front of your computer and get some of this stuff ready and do the job of applying for jobs, because it's a time-consuming thing, right? So apply for jobs. Don't take things personally if you don't get through to the next round. Remember, it's not always a person who looks at your application first. Every time that you apply for jobs, the next time gets a little bit easier. Do your homework, do your research, right? 10 really well-researched job applications are worth 100 where you just kind of like change the top of a cover letter and send it off. Think horizontally. So if you want to work, for example, at Channel 4 News, but there are no jobs going at Channel 4 News, but there's jobs going at ITV, well, they have the same parent company, ITN. So maybe you start at ITV and you're in the company emails, you're on payroll, and then you can start to make your way for Channel 4, right? So think horizontally, think laterally about how you can get to the place where you want to get. Don't overlook local journalism. It is an incredible place to start. There are many opportunities out there. The local democracy reporter gigs are an incredible way of getting a ton of experience under your belt. And all jobs will always teach you something. Again, apply. And in terms of how you think about your career, when I've looked at people's CVs and when people have looked at mine, the thing that can look more suspicious is if you have gaps in your CV. So if you graduated and then you worked somewhere for 6 months and then you didn't work anywhere for a year and then you went back to work somewhere for 3 months, that looks more suspicious to me than someone who graduated, went to find a job in PR, for example, or marketing or even retail for a year, but they already had a job, right? Your first job in journalism or in whatever is more about getting a first job and not getting fired from your first job. Do not underestimate the value of showing to someone on paper, this company decided not only that I was worth hiring, that I was good enough at my job not to be fired. And this changes further down in your career, right? But when you're just starting out, that job is incredibly important. And maybe it means you went to do social media or copy editing somewhere or something that is vaguely related to journalism, and then you can sidestep, right? And getting a job is way easier when you're already employed because, again, you have that stamp of approval from an existing employer to say, Laura is worth not firing, right? Which is a weird way to think about it, but it's actually 100% true. Before we move on, does anybody have any questions? I think there is a hold on a second. I don't think there is a Q&A section, but you can write them in the chat and I'll read them out, or I can read Amber can read them out for me from Facebook. So if anybody's got any questions so far or anything they want to ask or say, I'm going to count to 10 and then assume we're all on the same page and keep moving. So count to 10 in my head, kind of. Barbara says, if I have a gap in my CV because of personal and family issues, so that's 100% personal time is fine, but then you're going to have to explain it. Be ready to explain it when it comes to the interview part, right? You don't have to put it on your CV, but you can 100% explain it in person to kind of make that case. Danny's just asking, under the current COVID situation, would having a gap in your CV still count against me? No, I don't think it would. And I think it's important also to make sure that your CV, and we'll talk about CVs in a second, have got dates on them. So if very clearly your job stopped in March 2020, I kind of know why, right? Because coronavirus happened and a lot of people lost their jobs. But it's about finding other stuff to fill that gap that is activity, whether it's you're tweeting online or writing a blog or something to prove that you were still trying to hustle. That's important. It's showing that initiative, that you didn't just go, oh, well, I'm going to wait around until somebody else gives me a job, which I know you wouldn't, but you kind of have to prove that on paper when someone's just giving your CV a really quick skim. April's asking, if you read someone's CV and found out they've been working freelance, does that look like a gap? I sometimes only get commission once a month, but I do work every day. April, so that would not look like a gap. And it's all about how you visually represent it on your CV. So I would just say you've been a freelancer for the past year or however long, and then put some links to your work. Because I mean, people understand that sometimes maybe you just get published once a month, but it takes research every day, right? But you have been consistently working and being commissioned as a freelancer for a year or however long you've done it. So again, it's about how visually you write it on your CV. I wouldn't necessarily itemize it by like when your work gets published, more just like for these amount of time, I've been working and being commissioned as a journalist, if that makes sense. Isabel's asking, how would you structure your CV, chronologically or by the most journalism related work? Oh, Isabel, we'll get to CVs in a second, yeah, but I'm going to keep that question in the back of my mind. No questions on Facebook so far, so any last ones on Zoom before I move on? Right, I'm going to get back to it, kids. Oh, hold on a second. Lou Jen is asking, I worked in a different industry before deciding it wasn't for me and decided to change careers. Would that raise any alarm bells? 100% not, Lou Jane. No. Any job, and I mean it, any job gives you transferable skills. And it's all about how you sell it and about how you write it in your CV to relate it to journalism. Let me give you an example. When I was doing my master's degree, I needed money. And I found this gig reading the bingo online for a company in Spain. Yep, that's what I did. For 3 hours a night, 2 days a week, I would call out bingo numbers for this Spanish online company. Now, it doesn't sound unrelated to journalism, but the way I sold it, and I still sell it, is the job taught me to be live for 3 hours nonstop. I had to fill air. I learned how to think on my feet. I learned stuff about broadcast. I learned stuff about the gambling industry because I asked a bunch of questions about the behind the scenes. So when it came to covering stories about gambling, I had like an insider's view. It taught me how to like talk to people from a different country because I'm not from Spain, I'm from Mexico. So I had to read up a little bit on how they use phrases, make sure I didn't like step on it culturally or anything like that. And that's how I sell it, right? I used to babysit kids as well. That taught me patience and creativity and all this kind of stuff. So it's more about how you sell that both on your CV with what you learned from it or where your responsibilities were, and how you sell that at the more interviewee style stage to say, well, actually, this gives me an edge because I don't come from the same background as all these people who went from college to study journalism to then do a master's or whatever. My background is different, and that gives me an insight to a different community, and I can look at stories in a different way, right? That will never count, but you have to own that difference and own that change and say, you know what? Yeah, this actually gives me an in for these other kinds of stories, if that makes any sense, Lee Jane. And it's again, everything from stacking shelves at Asda to any random job you've ever had will have taught you something transferable, and it's all about how you sell it. Let's get back to it, kids, because this middle bit is where it gets intense. So building your brand online, right? This is about making a conscious decision to own everything that is findable about you online, on the internet. And it consists of 3 parts. So number 1 is the kind of things that you talk about, the topics that you talk about, your visual identity, and the work that backs up both of those things, right? So I'll give you an example with mine, and we'll go from there. And something that I used to tell my students all the time, and that eventually came back to bite me in the butt when I left, and they made me this adorable like goodbye present, but found some of my horrific Facebook pictures from when I was younger. The internet is infinite and forever. Everything that you have ever put on the internet is findable. There are people like me who have research skills who will find stuff that you've ever published online. So what I mean about your brand is starting to own that in a more professional way, where you take responsibility for every single act of publishing that you are doing. Whenever you tweet, you are doing an act of publishing. Whenever you're putting something on Instagram, it's an act of publishing. Whenever you're blogging, it's an act of publishing. And thinking about it like that is at the same time scary and hopefully hugely empowering, because it means you can use that to build this persona of who you are and what you like online. Just got a message from Facebook from Nicola. It says like she did 2 other careers before she retrained as a journalist, and she does not regret it, and you have to own the change. Yeah, you have to 100% own that change. So your brand, the one thing you need to assume is that people are going to Google you. It's just happening. It's a thing that's going to happen to you when you apply for jobs. There are now search engines within like HR companies that will do that Googling for people. Again, algorithms, they don't even have to go and do it, and they'll give them a little report of the stuff that they can find on you online. Now, this is all the stuff that's just publicly available, right? I'm not talking about private investigator style stuff. Again, it's the stuff that we willingly put on the internet and maybe sometimes don't think about as an act of publishing, but it is. And this building your brand idea is about owning what is going to come up when people put your name into Google or another search engine. And it should add to your brand, and it becomes proof of you, who you are, what you like, what your work is about. And it doesn't matter if that has all sorts of different tangents, right? And it's like a prism. If you're like me and you like lots of things, that's not a problem, as long as that becomes a cohesive, consistent narrative of the stuff that people can find online related to you. And it doesn't have to be boring. Professional and boring are not necessarily the same things. They're not mutually exclusive either, right? But It means that you can pick to have a personality online as long as whatever it is that you're putting online does not reflect badly on your ability to do your job. One of the questions that I always get asked by people, or when I was a lecturer, is politics, right? Politics is a hard one. Can I tweet about politics if I'm really political? Yes, probably, if you never want to write about politics in your life, right? The problem is, if you start to express a political view online, then that'll come back to bite you when you eventually become a political reporter, or you have to cover a local council or stuff like that. Or like, can I tweet about being hungover at work? Probably not, because I wouldn't want to hire you as an editor if you make fun of being hungover at work, right? Even though it's something that most of us have done at some point, right? Think about, what are you putting out into the internet that won't reflect badly back on your own ability to do your job. So for example, mine, and this takes a little bit of thinking, right? And deciding what you want to be this persona of you online. So this is the kind of stuff that I tweet about or post about or write about or talk about or in some way put out onto the internet and the world. Stuff about my current job, so the state of journalism, disinformation, use of the world, events coming up, videos I've done or pieces of work I've done. I promote colleagues' work, stuff about photography because I'm still into it, stuff about like interactive or data journalism. When it comes to press pad jobs for young journalists or cool opportunities, things about women in journalism, diversity in the media, my own personal personality, the things that I'm into personally, cats, space, memes and the internet culture, the various fandoms I'm a part of. So like, I'll tweet Lord of the Rings stuff or Star Trek stuff or Star Wars stuff or Harry Potter stuff. The fact that my sister is a gymnast and she's the most perfect human being that's ever existed. Stuff about Mexico, funny clips, TikToks, art, books, films. So again, it's not about not having a personality online. It's just none of those things reflect badly on my ability to do my job. And if you scroll through my Twitter feed, for example, you will see evidence of all of these things. So again, decide what your brand is going to be in terms of topics and make sure that everything you put out into the internet backs up that brand. And I can get sweary on Twitter. I tweet some really funny things sometimes. Well, not like mine, but like that other people tweet, or like some shady, like some Mexican memes that are funny only if you understand my particular region of Mexico, or like obscure song tweets and stuff like that. There's nothing wrong with having that personality online. So whatever it is that you want it to be yours, go for it. And that niche access to different communities you might have is not a thing to be ashamed of, right? So like my distinct love of, for example, classical music, because I do have one day will give me an in on a story. And it doesn't matter if it's now or in 5 years, but I know that, and I'm going to own that whenever that happens. And making sure that that is kind of plastered and interconnected across all of your social profiles, that they all linked back to each other and they all speak with one voice. It doesn't mean that they all have to say exactly the same thing, or that what you tweet is what goes on Instagram or whatever. Not at all. But that they sound like you speak with one voice. One of the questions that I always get asked as well is like, should I have a personal account and a like professional account? For someone starting out on their job, I would ask why. Like, if you are a celebrity and you want to have your private Insta so you can actually have a life, and then you have your celebrity Insta, fine. We're not those people, right? So my first question when someone has locked their private Instas or Twitters or social profiles is why? What is behind that is not okay for everybody to see? And this is really specific to journalism, I think, because part of our job is to tell stories and to communicate. And your use of these platforms, Twitter and Instagram and TikTok and Snapchat and whatever, is basically your audition material backing up the fact that you are digitally native and you're multimedia and you're interactive. I've got a question from Facebook from Aisha. Says, what if I've published an article in the past that I now disagree with as I've learned more about the subject, so feel it doesn't represent me now? That's a really tough one. I wouldn't necessarily go back and delete it, but I would be aware of it just in case you ever get asked questions and you have to back it up. Learning and growing and changing is a part of humanity, and I don't think journalists should be any less human. We just need to be transparent about that. So just be aware of it, right? So that one day, if you get asked questions, you have an answer to give. we're not perfect, and the things that we liked 10 years ago or we believed in might be different. And that is part of what makes us relatable to our audience and our public as well, right? It's kind of like the impossibility of politicians, why they have to be perfect. And when actually would be more refreshing if people were honest, right? So that's a really good question, Aisha. I hope that answers it. If not, type it back into the comments and Amber will send it back. So the other thing that I want to make a point about when it comes to your brand online is to make sure that they all link back to each other, and that you're capitalizing on the social clout of the places that you work for or the people that you work for. So for example, on my Twitter down here, I've got where I'm from, what I do, the handles of the different places that I've worked, because it means that then people can go and do their own research. So if they go, for example, to First Draft's website, they'll find my professional profile, right? That I actually work there. And if they go and look at PressPad's website, they'll see that I'm actually the co-founder. Or they go, or if they want to go and look at some of the stuff that the Center for Journalism has done in the past 5 years, they'll see my face on there eventually, and that backs you up. Same for example, Instagram, and LinkedIn is linked to all of them, right? So it's about making your work findable, interconnected, speak with one voice, and owning the fact that you are building this brand. Another question that I always get asked is, do I have to post every day? Do I have to post loads of things? I hate posting photos of my breakfast or whatever. Don't think about it like that. It's more about being consistent. It's more, again, about all of the themes and the things that you tweet about, speaking with one voice, and also about curating stuff. So most of the stuff that I tweet is not my own personal work. I am finding interesting bits of the internet that speak to my interests and putting them out there for people to see, as almost like a service of the issues that I follow, and also as a way to express my identity, to perform this identity online, right? And there's nothing wrong with having little differences in where your life lives. So for anybody who follows me on Twitter and Instagram, for example, my Twitter is a lot more professional. It's about my work. It's about events. It's about PressPad. My Instagram is basically my cat. It's just cat photos and travel photos. And there's nothing wrong, again, with segmenting it like that if that's how you feel that works for you. But for example, if I was in fashion journalism, I would probably want a lot more of my work to live on Instagram, because that's how fashion journalism works, right? So you kind of have to make these decisions yourself. And sometimes it's about trying a little bit and then seeing what works and going from there. CVs. This is where we get to the visual brand part of stuff. And I'm going to stop for a second in case anybody's got any questions. I can't see the chat, so I'm going to stop here for a sec to go back to read any questions. So far, anybody about kind of like the topics and the channels part of your brand? Hold on a second. I've got a couple of ones. Danny says, unfortunately, my name is shared by an adult film star in the US. Is there anything I can do about this? That is interesting, Danny. So I would say you have two options. One is you own it. So kind of like, what is the department store that does the really nice advert in the winter? Oh, and there's a man with the exact same name. What is that department store called? John Lewis. Thank you. Yeah. So John Lewis has owned that, right? It's on his Twitter bio, not that John Lewis, blah, blah, blah. I've heard that from, for example, one of our PressPad hosts who is called Kate Middleton, but she's a filmmaker. She's a documentary filmmaker, but she's also kind of owned. I mean, granted, that's not the same as a porn star. I 100% get it. But maybe what you have to think about is, how do you make your handles distinctive enough so that when people look for your handle, they'll find only you and not the porn star, right? Yeah, that, I think those are the two ways that I would deal with it. One, maybe you own it in a funny way. If that's not your personality, then maybe make sure that all of your handles are A, the same, so that they're all interlinked, and B, distinctive enough that when they Google that handle, so if you give someone your Twitter, you will come up and this lady won't. Does that make sense? Or you will come up first and then this lady come down second. So that's probably what I would say to that one, Danny. There's a question for Lauren. Do you have any tips on LinkedIn etiquette? Is it acceptable to reach out to journalists and talent executives who you don't know but have careers you're interested in? We'll get to LinkedIn in a second, Lauren. I'll remember that question. Genevieve is asking, is it worth starting something like a YouTube channel to show that you can talk on camera and edit it, and edit if broadcast journalism is something you want to potentially get into? Yeah, sure, that's not a bad idea, as long as you have something to say and that is well produced, so you don't have to speak for 40 minutes. 30 seconds of really nicely made, engaging YouTube is way better than 40 minutes that are boring. And also, don't restrict yourself to YouTube. Why not Instagram Live? Why not Insta Stories, right? So think of these new forms of telling stories that journalists like me in the newsroom might be a little bit more foreign to. Or what about TikTok, right? That is a very new frame by frame vertical storytelling medium that you can use as a way to prove that not only you have broadcast skills, but that you are forward thinking and you are the future, right? So totally, why not? Daniel goes, if I have a double-barreled surname and have been told to pick one to get more jobs to be searchable, is this something you recommend? So I'm going to do you one better than that, Danielle. I have 3 surnames. My full name is Laura Garcia Rodriguez Blancas. Take that in your pipe and smoke it, right? So what I've done is I've made my Twitter handle the initials of my name, Laura GRB. So my full name is on there, but Laura GRB is actually quite easy to remember. And I've made it the same across all of my profiles. So I'm the same on Twitter, that I'm on Instagram, that I'm on LinkedIn, that I'm on Facebook. So it's all easy to find, right? And because I felt really bad, I didn't want to give up any of my surnames. When I published, I think I published more commonly as Laura Garcia, just because it's shorter. But at least I keep that part of my identity in my Twitter handles. So that's a choice that you kind of have to do. And also, if you don't want to get rid of your double-barreled name, the world can deal, right? You own that. You don't. The industry is changing enough that I think you guys can also help us make it change more by owning your identity, whatever you want that to be. You don't have to change to get published, and you shouldn't have to change to get published. And there are people like me and Olivia at PressPad and the whole team fighting so that you don't have to change to get published, and that doesn't matter, right? But you might think, you know what, actually it makes sense if I make it an acronym out of my name or use this or that, and that can be a good compromise. It just depends if you feel comfortable with it, but you shouldn't feel pressure to do that. Let me see. Ellie says, another UK journalist shares my name, but I've already published numerous articles under this name. Is this an issue? No, I think you just need to make sure that your handles make you distinctive enough from this other Ellie house so that you can like be differentiated and be really clear who's who. But I don't think that's a problem. Again, it's more about making sure that you as a person are findable, and we'll talk about websites and portfolios in a second, and that'll make a bigger difference than whether you share a name with someone. Barbara's asking another question. Just wanted to follow up about gaps in CVs. They should be 1 page long. I've done another job, so put them on there. I'm only putting stuff relevant to the job. So we'll come to CVs is the next one, but I have no problem with double-sided CVs. So it's 2 pages, right? Because I can print it all in one space. Anything longer than that, I have no time for. Our industry has no time for. So for example, in academia, if you don't submit a CV that's like 10 pages long, no one's going to look at you. But that's a completely different industry, right? But for journalism, I'd say 1 double-sided page is fine. Question from Facebook. Is it possible to be a successful journalist without using Twitter? In the UK, you are going to struggle. It changes country by country. And it's more about using the tools to communicate with other journalists and to prove that you can do the job, right? As a person going into the industry, one of your very first jobs is probably going to be social media, because the people who are older and are editors, A, have more important things to do, and B, don't understand them. So you not being on Twitter is almost like a big alarm bells that maybe you don't know how Twitter works. Even if you do, I'm not saying you don't, but even if you do, like being on Twitter, being on Instagram, being on TikTok, being on all these places is about showing that you know how to use them and that you understand the language of that platform. In the UK, you are going to struggle without being on Twitter. I would ask why. It changes from country to country. So for example, where I'm from in Mexico, journalists have Twitter, obviously, but also a bunch of them have like professional Facebook pages because Facebook is bigger. And again, that'll change country by country, right? But in the UK and in the US, you are going to struggle. I'd suggest just bite the bullet and get on Twitter, Ollie. You'll be fine. Let me some other question. Matt asks, does what we retweet and share count as part of our online brand? Yes, 100%, Matt, because you're almost giving it like a thumbs up of approval. You're going like, I like this. So careful as well with retweeting or liking horrific stuff on Twitter, racist memes, sexist stuff, all that kind of, like, again, that all counts against you. It's the same bar that we would hold up to politicians. So hold that same bar up to you. Georgie says, when it comes to Twitter rants, should these be deleted even if it fits your brand, with calling out inequalities or faults in brand advertisement? Depends how, Georgie, and it depends who you're calling out and how you've done it and whether it's argument based. As journalists, remember that we tell stories with facts and backed up with facts and arguments and what other people are saying. So a random tweet of like, I fucking hate the world because blah, 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 with nothing to back it up, maybe. Yeah, maybe. Or leave them if they're far enough in your past, because again, we grow and we learn. And then just be careful in what kind of stuff you get involved in the future. Again, it doesn't mean you can't have emotions, and it doesn't mean you can't get involved in Twitter fights or like arguments. It's just about thinking about it a little bit more. Yeah. April says, I love coding outside of journalism. Do you think it's a good idea to create my own website with a portfolio? April, yes. Journalism needs coders. I'll get to it, but 100% yes, do that. Anna Marshall says, I joined late, some of you covered this, but what do you think about following people you're working for? I'm worried about seeming intense. Anna, don't be worried about seeming intense, because men probably wouldn't. Sorry, that was really blunt, but it's probably true. Don't be worried. And we'll talk about how you can also do Twitter lists if you want. And then that way you can be aware of what people are tweeting without having to follow them if you feel that's a little bit too intense. I have no shame and just follow people that I work with because we work together, and why shouldn't we follow each other, right? If you're feeling super shy, doing a Twitter list is probably the way to do that. I think some people sometimes have a separation between. So I had colleagues who've told me I don't follow colleagues on Facebook because that's where my personal life is, but I'll 100% follow you on Twitter. Fine. You can have those conversations, right? But I wouldn't stop myself. I'd click request, and then my colleague would come and ask and talk to me and say, hey, I don't want to follow you because I keep this separation. And then I'd go, well, I completely understand that. That's fine. Right? But never stop yourself from like feeling too pushy or too intense. Just go for it. I mean, obviously, if you haven't even got the job yet and you've started following everyone in the office, that might be a little bit too intense. But if you've got the job, if you're working there, why not follow your colleagues? Barbara's asking, I am Portuguese, and when I was studying in Portugal, I did a bunch of broadcast stuff as a uni ambassador. Now that I'm in the UK, I have no idea of how to show recruiters that I can talk on camera because all of that content is in Portuguese. What should I do? Barbara, subtitle it. Sort it. There is a website called headliner.app, which is like a very rudimentary video editing software online, but it has a cool subtitling system, and it can help you crop things to square or to horizontal and whatever. So just subtitle it. People read subtitles. It's fine. Tash is asking, when you say it's important to use Insta, Twitter, TikTok, etc. to be a journalist, do you mean for print or broadcasting? Excellent question. For all of it. Because as a young person coming into journalism, and I mean young, not in age, but I'm assuming everyone here is kind of like in the first stages of their career. So even if you're doing a side hustle and you've already had a career elsewhere, you are young in that sense, yeah? The only thing that you have going for you when you're competing with people like me for jobs is that you are more digitally native than I am. It takes me, I'm on TikTok just because I wanted to teach myself how to do it. It takes me probably about 50 minutes to make a TikTok. I'm not kidding. It genuinely does. It takes me ages because it's a technology that is starting to get a little bit too advanced for me. It'll take you 15 minutes. It takes my students 50, like they're magical at all this kind of stuff. And being on these platforms, again, shows that you understand the language. You don't have to like them. It's more about having that proof to back up what is probably your biggest advantage when you're going into the industry, the fact that you're digitally native and one of the first jobs that you're going to do. And then you can sidestep, right? Like this changes once you've been in the industry a couple of years and you start to specialize. But I think at least at the beginning, it's hugely important for all of them. Let me take a question from Facebook. Tim says, will this be available to watch after Just Got Here? Yeah, Tim, 100%. It's going to be recorded on Facebook and on YouTube. Yes, So you can watch later and rewind and all that kind of stuff. Irene asks, I curate my college literary magazine Twitter account and its blog, but I'm personally only active on Facebook and LinkedIn. Do you think it's crucial to be more active across a wider range of social media? Not if, Irene, you have very clearly made it obvious that you are the one, that you're the person behind this other Twitter account and the blog, right? The point is showing that you have the skills. Whether they're in your personal channel or not is a different thing. Might be an idea to start your own personal account, even if you don't post all the time, but just so that when the moment comes that you don't manage this other Twitter account and a blog, you have something to go back to, right? Because fresh Twitter accounts with no content on them are really fishy. So if you haven't posted in 6 months, it's going to look a little bit strange. And we'll do another masterclass on TweetDeck, because that can let you manage several accounts at the same time, and it means that you wouldn't even have to tweet twice. You can tweet once and it goes to 2 separate places, right? So for now, maybe just make it super clear that you are the voice behind this Twitter account and this blog. So it means that when you're applying for jobs, they have clear evidence that you know how to do it. Does that make sense? Hold on a second. Let me see if I can. Maxim asks, it's often difficult to disentangle politics from journalism. Yes, it is. If you wanted to show praise online of a particular piece of journalism, it could be interpreted as endorsement of or opposition to a political view. A recent example would be the Sunday Times insight. Good point. Now, Boris Johnson not attending cover meetings. How would you navigate this dilemma? So I personally have no problem praising that kind of stuff. As long as you caveat it, right? So if you tweet, oh my God, Boris Johnson is the worst person ever, here's evidence by the Sunday Times, that is a completely different tweet to saying incredible investigative journalism work by the insights team at the Sunday Times that gives us a window into government. Those are 2 very different ways of tweeting the same article, but they give it a completely different twist that speaks to who you are and what you do and your opinions and your thoughts and all that kind of stuff. And it doesn't mean that you privately can think whatever you want of anybody that you want. It's more about protecting your ability to do your job in the future, so that if and when you get to interview future prime ministers, you can do so with the freedom to ask questions without people second guessing where you're coming from. Does that make sense? And it's also about choosing different pieces of journalism, right? So there's ultra right and ultra left outlets that the moment that you're sharing that content implies a political slant in and of itself, and that's not necessarily a problem, right? So I've got friends who, for example, write for the New Statesman. Well, they have to have a political view because the New Statesman has a political view, right? And that's part, but they knew that's where they wanted to go and work, and that was a conscious decision of them, right? For most of us, we're not going to find our ideal job in your first step or your second step or probably your third step. It's going to take you a couple of side hustles to get to where you want to go, and you need to protect your freedom to do that. Yeah, it's not about censorship. It's about protecting your own ability to make decisions in the future. Yeah. Lou Jane asks, it sounds like you need multiple skills just to get a foot in the door. On top of the mental impact on being on multiple platforms every day sounds a lot. How do you find the balance without being overwhelmed at the start of your career before you get exhausted? Excellent question, Lee Jane. And this is about working smart rather than hard. So I'm not saying you have to be on absolutely every single social media platform. Think about the part of the industry that you want to go into and which ones might matter, and make sure you're on those. So for like across the board, I think Twitter is a must in journalism in the UK. Again, changes country by country. But if you're into fashion, Instagram might be more important, or even Pinterest might be more important. So you don't have to be on everything. If the part of the industry that you want to go to has a more specific slant. So it's about trying it out, and also about figuring out automation. And we can do a separate webinar on that, but there's a bunch of websites that help you manage different social media accounts just from one place, like Deliverit or Buffer or If This Then That or Later for Instagram, which means that I used to do this for myself ages ago. You spend 2 hours on a Monday scheduling a bunch of things, and then they get published across your social media platforms across the week. And it looks like you're so on it when you're not. I mean, you are, but it just means that you did it in a smart way. And that way you don't have to live with this constant stress of like, am I everywhere all the time and doing all the things, right? Because you're 100% right. You need to find your own pace. And again, this will change person to person, but it's just things to think about, right? Lauren asks, I went to a couple of Labour Party meetings and tweeted about them. Should I delete those tweets? I don't think you necessarily should. Did you go as like a private human person? Were you interested in joining the Labour Party? Because I think that's different. So obviously being a card-carrying member of a party is a really big political declaration, and that's different to attending a meeting just to see what's going on or to cover it as a journalist. And I think you need to check that, and also how far away were they and what is the content of the tweet, right? So again, if you're saying Labour is the only answer to all of the single problems that we have in this country, well, that kind of closes a lot of doors for you, which is contrary to maybe a wider tweet about the things you were seeing or what people were saying, right? So maybe I think it's a little bit more nuanced than that. Oh, that was a lot of questions. April asks, I am a disabled journalist, and around 5 years ago, I was a disability advocate. This involved tweeting about local council actions and protests. Could this work against me? I wouldn't think so, April. More importantly, because what you were tweeting about is kind of like part of you and your identity and fighting for your rights and to diversify the media and the communities that were there. So I don't think so. I mean, again, unless you tweeted something horrific like Councillor X is a Y, right? Like, but that's a different story. Sarah asks, I find myself mostly drawn to investigative journalism and research, but don't want to narrow my options. How do you suggest balancing being driven, knowing your strengths and where your passion lies, while also being flexible and willing to learn and try new things? Sarah, the industry is not going to give you a choice. Unless you are very, very, very lucky, your first couple of jobs are not going to be in investigative journalism. Investigative journalism has always been a profession that you earn with time and with experience. So you're going to have to try a little bit of everything at the beginning, learn loads of stuff, and then eventually find your niche in investigative journalism. And particularly for women, look at the IWMF's fund, the International Women's Foundation for Media Fund for Women. Oh, I've messed that up. IWMF, because they will fund stories. They will fund women to go and do stories that they want. So maybe you have a day job that teaches you a broad range of skills, and you research a story really well, and you get funding for it, and you go do it on your own and go and do it like an investigative project on your own. And that's how you start to balance it out to find your niche. Yeah. I hope that made sense. Right, kids, let's get back to a little bit of CVs, because I think this is where a lot of the questions come in. Not that we haven't had questions. This has been great. Amazing questions. Keep them coming. I will come back to them, yeah? Oh, I should have gotten some water. I'm running out of air. Right, okay. So CVs, and this brings me back to Isabel's question about how do you structure it. So there's a couple of like cardinal rules around CVs that I think are super important to keep in mind. Number one is never ever in your life, ever again, turn in a Word document as your CV. Done. Don't do that anymore. You turn in a PDF with your name on it, I've been given CVs called CV, and if you're one of 500 applicants who have all named their CV, and not your name on it, the extra 5 minutes that it's going to take me to find your CV is too much for that first hurdle, right? Remember, we're working for that first step of the application where you have 6 to 10 seconds to impress someone or to impress an algorithm to get through and jump over that first step. So don't turn in a Word document. You turn in a PDF with your name on it, your full name on it, because there might be different Lauras. Laura Garcia, CV 2020. Yeah? Good. Your CV should be simple, clean, easy to scan, because again, if I only have 6 to 10 seconds to go and decide whether you're in or out, or if I'm an algorithm, words need to be really easy to read. Clutter doesn't help machines read. And I know it sounds super scary, and we can park that conversation about whether that's fair or not. It's how things are starting to work. You better learn to work it. Yeah. It's branded, so it looks different. It's not just a Word document, and it matches my LinkedIn, and it matches all of my other social profiles, right? Again, about bringing this brand and building this brand as an interconnected web of stuff online. Now, I have laid this out on a software called Canva, which is a free design software, which I'll show you in a second. And it means that visually as well, my CV stands out from the pile because it's not just another Word CV. I made myself a little logo, and that's just a font. And I made sure that that is the brand and my colors that are shown across my different application materials. And it's a gimmick. You're playing the gimmick. You want to be memorable. You want to jump this first hurdle, which is the hardest one, so that then someone can lovingly read your CV and lovingly read your work in the second and the third step. First step, that's not what you're getting. You're getting 10 seconds max of someone's attention. And that's what we're fighting against, right? And that's the important part. So if, for example, Ayo, who does our social, has a really lovely CV with these like red burgundy colors, totally represents him. That's great. I didn't feel that way. I wanted something more monochrome and a little bit like thin. Fine, that works for me. Some of my other students have got like really lovely greens or yellows or colors that work for them, or they want to have little flags of the languages that they speak, because some of my former students are beautifully multilingual. Great, right? Just make sure that it matches across. So this is, for example, what my actual CV looks like that I used to apply for the job that I now have. And you'll notice a couple of other things. My contact details are on it, just in case someone prints it out and leaves it out on a desk. So even though I probably included those contact details in my email or in a job application, I make sure that they're on everything that I turn in, so that I'm easy to find, easy to contact, easy to remember. And to Isabel's question about what do you put first, what kind of experience do you put first? It depends what you have the most experience on or what looks most impressive. So again, starting out in journalism, you might not have a ton of journalism experience to show off. So it's more important to put it chronologically, right? But maybe you did the one internship, which was actually really impressive. So you can maybe separate that out and then put the rest of your work experience. Or if you did a career change, like someone was asking, then maybe it's just more important to show the chronology of that career change, and there's no shame in that, and you own it, and then just highlight your journalism work in a different way. Yeah, so it kind of depends. And it'll change depending on how much work you've got and where your experience has been. And again, remember that every job you've ever had has transferable skills, and it's just about how you sell it. So if you sell it the right way, it doesn't matter if you were stacking shelves at Asda for 3 years. To me, that actually shows persistence, and that you consistently showed up for a job, and that you're willing to put in the work, even if the job isn't super glamorous, and that makes you a team player. All those kind of things, right? CVs. Cover letters. So I make my cover letters look like my CVs. Again, so it's part of this brand that I'm building, right? That has my contact details on them, makes me really easy to find, that matches my LinkedIn, that has a PDF with my name. So I turn in Laura Garcia CV and Laura Garcia cover letter, right? And with references. Now, I don't put people's contact details on those references, because I don't want them to be contacted like just by 500 people, but I put their names and their titles just to show the kind of caliber of people that can vouch for me. I'm using other people's social clout to say, I am who I say I am, right? So this particularly, for example, is my cover letter for when I applied for the job that I have now at First Draft. So I highlighted the references that I thought were relevant to that particular job that would make me stand out. And then if they want to contact people, they can ask me, and then I can ask them, and all that kind of stuff. Now, if you're going to put someone as a reference on any of your materials, make sure you have that conversation with them first, right? The last thing you want is, for example, for someone to call me up about a student I had 5 years ago, and I go, who are you talking about? Or like that I have no idea, right? I know some of my former students, for example, have asked me if I can be their like forever referee, and that's fine, but I know about it. So if I ever get a call about one of these people, I know what to say, right? We've had that chat, we've had that agreement. I've also put that same branding in my email signature. So again, think about how you make everything that when you apply, whether it's through an email or a website, or everything needs to look like you, sounds like you, and it's a shameless act of self-promotion and a gimmick, but I promise you it works. Yeah, and it makes it look like either you had the foresight to hire someone to do this branding work for you, or that you know how to do it yourself. And that's actually more impressive, because I've had people ask me in my interviews like, oh, well, your CV is really nice. Who made it for you? And I go, no, I can do it. I know how to design stuff. I can work with images. I can work with posters. I can work with this kind of stuff. And they go, ooh, right? So again, everything that you put into a job application becomes an audition and proof of the skills that you've got. And even when it comes to business cards are cheap to print. And you can get yourself a couple of them and have them in your bag all the time, ready to just like shamelessly give out at a moment's notice. And for example, the last ones I got printed for myself had a QR code on them, so that it doesn't even have to have my contact details on them. It's a QR code on my website, and the QR code takes you to my website, where if you want to find my contact details, you have to stumble through a bunch of my work. So I am forcing you to see what I'm up to, and I'm forcing you to see my website. And it means that the chances of you getting exposed to my work are higher, and it makes you look like impressive. QR codes are like the newest thing. I don't know if you guys knew, but if you don't need an application to read a QR code anymore, you can just point your camera at it. So you can try it now. If you just turn on your camera phone, that made me sound like 80 years old. Your camera, just pointed at that QR code, a little thingy would show up that says open link. So again, these gimmicks make you memorable. And they go, oh, it's the girl with the QR code business cards. Of course she is, right? And again, maybe that's what sticks into their head. I know some of my students put QR codes on their CVs. Fine, sounds great to me. Why not? And again, Canva, in case you haven't played around with Canva, it's a free online design software that is web browser based. So wherever you are in the world, you can log in and change stuff. And it's actually quite easy to use. It's really intuitive. And it lets you make everything from CVs to cover letters, business cards, your Twitter cover, your Instagram posts, the covers for your Insta stories, vertical designs for Snapchat, all of it. It's all there. And it's got templates and it's got things you can play with. So there's no reason why your stuff shouldn't look super slick and polished. Again, because that's going to make you stand out, right? Remember that 15-year-olds with amazing cameras and a bit of an edit suite can have awesome YouTube channels. So the bar has been raised. We have to rise up to that challenge, because you're saying, look at all the things that I could do for myself. Wouldn't you like someone to do that for your newsroom or for your brand? And this applies the same across print and broadcast and online and radio and everything. If you can become the person who is their solution to a lot of problems, and you sell yourself that way. So for example, with my job at First Draft, I went, hi guys, look, I like to teach. I'm good with video. I can do interactive stuff. I build websites. I can tweet. We can do stuff on Instagram Live. I have broadcast experience. I can write scripts. I can write you articles. They go, oh yeah, of course, let's hire her instead of those other 5 people, right? And again, you might not be as multimedia, but try and make sure that you have as many strings to your bow as you can, especially because some of this stuff is easier to learn now. Like, you don't need specialized software for design. It's just about fighting with it a little bit and like wrapping your head around it. A website. Make yourself a website. Websites don't have to be super fancy. And they can be a blog website. And the whole point of having a website is twofold. Number one, so that all of your portfolio of work lives in one space. So for example, if somebody ever asks me for a sample of my work, I don't send them the published piece wherever it went. I send them to the place where I've embedded it on my website. So that when they open it, they see that part of the specific bit that they were asking for, but then they can also poke around my website and discover the other stuff that I'm into, right? Again, you are increasing your probability of people seeing the caliber of your work and what you're up to. And the other thing is that if you buy your own domain name, so for example, mine is lauragrb.com, which are not expensive. They're something like 12 quid a year tops. It looks really pro at the bottom of your CV, on your Twitter feed, on your everywhere. And you don't even have to build yourself a website if you don't want to. You can buy the URL and redirect it to your LinkedIn account, for example. And it's about, again, building this brand of who you are online and looking polished and easy to find. The other good thing about having a website is that all of your contact details are there. So if someone ever stumbles across my work and then goes, oh, she's great, I'd love to hire her, it's very easy to find my phone number. It's very easy to find my email. And again, this is different to other industries, right? Where you might want to have that separation and not be that easy to find or go through specific channels. As journalists, we tell stories. We should be available for our audience. That's part of the gig. And that is part of the compromise that we make when we're trying to get into this crazy, beautiful industry. And your website can change as your identity can change over time. So today I had a look at what my website and my visual identity looked when I started out in journalism around 2008. And I made this little logo for myself in, I think I did it in Photoshop and then built myself a website in Dreamweaver. And it was crap, you guys. And I hate these pink colors now. And I hate the little camera. It just makes me cringe. But at the time, I felt it really represented who I was, because I wanted to be more of a photo video like person, creative editor. And it doesn't matter if that identity and your brand grows and matures with you, right? As you do these little side hustles to find your space. And it's also about, like, again, making your work easy to find. So maybe you think, you know what, I don't have time to build myself a website, but what I really want to do is work in broadcast, and I've got these samples of my work. Maybe it's about just making sure you have a YouTube playlist. So I have one called Laura Garcia Work Showcase that has some of my coolest different ranges of work. So anything from a recent video I just did for a fact-checking kind of like show, to some 360 interactive video I've done, some financial reporting, some more social reporting. And that one playlist kind of shows the range of all the things that I'm into and that I can do. And it doesn't have to be fancy, right? Like, it's anybody can be on YouTube. So maybe that's what you do. You curate yourself a really nice YouTube channel. Doesn't have to have loads on it, just has to have stuff that represents who you are, your most recent work, and then just redirect your URL to it. And you put that URL on your CV, on your cover letter, on your Twitter, in your LinkedIn, everywhere, right? And again, driving that brand into people's head, to make you feel like you're this product, because you kind of are, which is sad. But it's the game that we play so that then we can tell the stories that matter to us and do the work that matter to us, right? Oh, right. So before I move on to the next bit, let's see if anybody's got some questions in the chat. So hold on a second. Thank you. Barbara says, should you put achievements related to a job? Say, for instance, your company got an award thanks to the work that you did there. Yeah, 100%, Barbara. I'd put that there under each like date, or like under each job, or if you got an award while you're at that job, 100%. Rebecca asked, I've mainly written about the entertainment industry, but there aren't many jobs for that available. Most are political news jobs, and they refuse me based on not having enough relevant work experience, past experience. How can I work around this, try to overcome it? Rebecca, I think you just need to get in somewhere, anywhere. And maybe it's through the social media desk or the online desk, because once you're in a company and you're on the payroll and you're in the same room as people, then you can find your niche. And also we have to remember, like with any companies, this isn't just in journalism, some jobs get advertised internally first before they go out. So you have a higher chance of getting a job if you're in the company, right? So again, if you want to really work for Channel 5 News, for example, but there's no jobs there, but there's jobs at Channel 4 doing Twitter, they're both ITN, so maybe go and get in there, right? Or News UK, for example, which has The Sun and a bunch of other titles. Get into one of them. It doesn't really matter. And then you can figure out your way from there. Mimi says, how do you make a signature on your email, your branding? So you make an image, and then Gmail and Outlook both have in the settings part, you can change what your email signature looks like, and you just put the photo there and all the links that you want, and that's how you do it. Eden asks, do you have any recommendations on getting started online portfolios or websites? I don't think it matters. It depends. Just pick one on how complicated you want it to be. LinkedIn could be your portfolio for a start. I haven't talked about LinkedIn much, but that's the one place you cannot escape. For some reason, HR and recruitment are really into LinkedIn. I've gotten jobs offered through LinkedIn. So just bite the bullet and be on LinkedIn. I don't actually understand it as a network. I don't like it, but I'm on it because I know it's important to the people that will give me a job. And it has a way of you linking or listing links for each of your jobs or your places of study. So maybe that can be your first portfolio. I think it's more about, if you start to think about it loads and you want to make it perfect, you will never actually do it. Just start somewhere. It can be a blogger. It can be Wix. It can be LinkedIn. It can be a YouTube channel. It can be one single page just with a bunch of links and your contact details at the bottom. It doesn't really matter. It's more about like starting somewhere. Barbara says, I get so confused with this thing of designing CVs. I can do it and I've done it, but HR people from my career center at uni told me to use words always and forget the designs. Would you say this is more relevant to media jobs? Yes, Barbara, 100%. Yeah, this is really specific to journalism and media and creative industries kind of stuff. I'm sure it's 100% different for other industries. But I've never worked in them, so I have no idea how they work. But career people at unis have to give like generic advice to everybody, right? So I'm sure they meant it from a nice place in their heart. And I'm also not saying like your CV needs to look like confetti. It's just more about making it stand out. It can be super simple. The level of design can just be different fonts and some lines. Fine, right? It's just about making it different. Got a question from Facebook that says, Nina, in terms of branding, what would you put as your title? For example, should it be trainee journalist or just journalist? Because I feel like I'm not quite at that stage yet as a student. So this goes for everybody. If you're doing journalism, you are a journalist. The prefix student becomes this kind of like dirty secret that we're all trying to hide. If you're talking to people, if you're doing interviews, if you're writing up articles, if you're producing reports, you are doing journalism, and therefore you are a journalist. That's how I would say. You're not an award-winning journalist yet, or you're not an NCTJ certified journalist yet, for example, maybe, but you are 100% a journalist, so own that, with all the responsibility that comes with it as well, right? Another question from Facebook. Alice, one of my former students asks, I was told by the careers team at my uni to leave off my interview at Cambridge and 3-year retail job at the co-op when I've been to interviews around placements. I got told that these things may be relatable and help me get the job. Should I take them off or leave them on my CV? It kind of depends what else you've got space for, Alice. So if you're running out of space, don't put them in. If you have the space, put them in. Part of who you are. You should be ashamed of whatever you had to do to get to where you are. I think it's more about the space on a page. And if adding those in makes the page look really cluttered, I'd strike them off. I'd go more for visual impact than anything else. Remember that there's a bunch of stuff that you can also mention in an interview that you don't put in your CV, but it's about getting into that room so you have that opportunity to make the case for yourself. Isabel says, if some of your best work exists on a separate website like shorthand stories or page flow, indeed, how do I showcase it on my portfolio website, or is there a smart way of going about that? I would take screenshots, Isabel, so that if page flow ever dies, you have proof, and then just link to it so people can go and see it. Or do screen recordings. If you download QuickTime, you can record your screen. So if there's any interactivity in it that you want to highlight, you can do that, or maybe even turn it into a GIF. There's an app that you can install on Chrome, which is free, called GIFOX, GIFOX. And it lets you record any part of the screen and make a really cool GIF out of it. So maybe that's how you do it. And it's a blog post on your website with lots of GIFs that show the interactivity of your story, and then you link out to the story. And yeah, Danny's right as well. You can compile online clips on Muckrack. Matt says, how frequently would you recommend updating your CV LinkedIn? As frequently as it needs changing, Matt. So if you get a new job, change it. If your job title changes, change it. If you publish something cool, update it. It just kind of depends what you're up to and how much activity you've got on there. Madeline's going to ask, this is probably something you might cover in the next section, but what are your tips for getting more commissions for features? Oh yeah, we're going to talk about finding places to pitch, Madeline, in a second. Right. Another section. Are we ready? Oh, one last question. Ellie Kemp asks, how do you develop your own brand? Or what do you do if you can't decide on a brand for yourself? Ellie, you're going to have to do a lot of soul searching, hun, and start to find it. So maybe start small. So maybe like your colors can be really simple and just do some nice font that kind of is just not a Word document, right? Times New Roman is your worst enemy because that's boring and old and not who you are. And then you can gradually build it, right, through the work that you do. And you don't have to be married to these topics or these issues that you decide for your brand. These can change with you as you go along, but maybe you're talking more about core values, right? Maybe you like journalism that's thoughtful, or about human rights, or that is about human interest stories, or that is about identity politics. So it can be broader. I gave you an example of how I've managed to boil down my visual brand and my brand online, but I've been working as a journalist one way or another for 10 years, right? And this has changed and evolved and been refined the more and more I find my own voice. But I think you don't have to be perfect to speak with a voice, and that's part of it, right? We have this myth that is not just existent in journalism, it exists as well in art or in music or any of the creative arts, where you're just supposed to know, right? You're supposed to wake up and just know what you're going to say, know what you're going to write, know the song that's going to be your masterpiece. And the reality is that artists do a bunch of like shitty sample and try and error until they find the right way to paint a picture, or musicians fight with lyrics and with harmony. The same with us. Finding your voice takes work, and there's absolutely no shame in that, because that is how everybody finds their voice, right? So start somewhere, even if it feels a little bit more broader, and then you can refine as you go along in your career. There's nothing wrong with saying, yeah, I like 20 things and I'll figure out what I like more later down the road. But maybe that's what defines you, right? That you are trying to look at a bunch of different stuff. Or maybe think about the things that you definitely don't like, right? And you start to define your brand by exclusion. So for example, are you into gaming journalism, which is huge? If you're not, that's already one thing that's not in your brand, right? Are you into financial stuff? If you're not, maybe that's another thing that's off your brand, right? And that's fine. And that's how you can start to whittle it down. Got a question. Your CV was mainly your work experience. Would you recommend this, or should we introduce education, achievements, other experience? That was the front side of my CV. I should have shown you the back side. So the front side was work experience, and the back side has education, languages, and like skills, like the software that I work with, some awards that I've gotten, and hobbies and interests and that kind of stuff. So sorry, I should have shown you the backside of it, but that is definitely there. And when I was starting out, I would put my education first and then my work experience, because that was the most relevant thing. So for example, I studied at CFJ as well and got my master's there. And when I graduated, that was my biggest calling card. I had just done a master's degree in journalism, right? So that was at the top with the rest of my education, and then everything else was underneath it. April says, one of my biggest problems has been keeping track of when I've been published. Sometimes I've lost bylines. What is your advice with this, other than emailing all the editors for PDFs? So number one, April, don't let this happen to you ever again. Find a system that works for you, where the moment you get published, you save a copy. And whether it's a PDF printout of a website or a link or anything like that, so first, prevent it for the future. Don't let this happen again. And then the second one is, you might have to do a little bit of Googling of yourself and emailing other people. And think about as well, how many of these samples do you actually need? So if you wrote 10 pieces for one publication, but they're all kind of in the similar vein, maybe you just need one to represent that you worked in this place, right? Or if you work somewhere for a year and you wrote like council stories, crime stories, and another type of story, then maybe you just need one of each. And it means that the detective work that you have to do is smaller. Does that make sense? And yeah, just make sure it never happens to you ever again. The moment you get published, you save a copy. Right, kids, last section. We good? Let's do it. So, where to find jobs? So now that you understand the industry, and now that you have started to build your brand online, and this takes time, guys, right? But again, the one thing we all have right now is time. The question is, where do you find these jobs? So, hold on a second. There's a couple of different big categories. And again, this is really specific to the UK, and it changes country to country. In this country, there's job sites. So for example, Cision Jobs is one of our partners at PressPad, and they have like a portal for journalism jobs. There's more international ones like Indeed or Reed or Monster, where companies will post jobs. You can make a profile for yourself, and then with that profile, apply for jobs. A lot of these portals have LinkedIn import. So you don't have to build your profile from scratch. You just say, link my portal on Cision with LinkedIn. And then it means that you just apply with one go without having to fill it out every single time, which is why LinkedIn is really important. On LinkedIn, you can follow companies that you want to work for. And the moment that they post a job advert, you get an alert. So you can be the first to know. A lot of applying for jobs is sometimes about being the first to know. Not because the first to apply have more chances, but because it means it gives you more time to prepare. If you find out that your dream job has a deadline of 5 o'clock tomorrow, you have no time to prepare than if you'd known 2 weeks ago, right? So it's about giving yourself that edge by being the first to know, so you can plan as well. Job hunting and applying, it can be a full-time job. So if you're working on 5 or 6 job applications on the go, having as much leeway as possible is the most important, right? Um, Twitter is a really big one. Again, this is specific to the UK because a lot of companies or people will post specifically about jobs on Twitter as a filter. They are not interested in you working for their company unless you know how to use Twitter, because that's going to be part of your job. And this goes back to your comment, Oli, like, is it going to be hard? Yes, it will, because that plays into it, right? So Twitter is a big part of it, and I'll show you how to find jobs on Twitter and how to find places to pitch to as well on Twitter. And you can do it by following people or lists that kind of like conglomerate accounts that tweet about jobs in the UK, in journalism, in the media, and television production, and copywriting. All of these like little satellite spaces of journalism that can be a good way in. Remember as well that to think horizontally, right? How do you side hustle into the job that you really want? And your first job might not be the ideal one. It might be with a trade publication, which are really important and an excellent way of getting super niche knowledge and getting tons of experience. So do not, like, those B2B, like Dentist Daily or whatever, like industry publications are sometimes a really good way to get into journalism, because you get that experience and then you can move up, right? And also remember that big companies will have their own websites. So like Sky has their own portal, ITV has their own portal, ITN has their own portal. The BBC has two, one for the BBC in the UK and one for the World Service, which is like outward facing. And some of them have parent companies. So for example, if you wanted to work for CNN, their parent company is Warner Media or Turner Inc. So you have to look for Turner Inc.'s portal to see CNN jobs listed. So it's about knowing as well where to look, right? So let me show you a couple. So on LinkedIn, and this is just to show off my place of work, First Draft. So if you go to a company's profile on LinkedIn, there is, if you click on these three little arrows on the right, it gives you this drop down menu. And if you click the plus sign, it lets you follow that company. So the moment that they put a job advert, you get an alert. So for example, right now we're hiring for a copy editor. If you're interested in working for First Draft, you get that ping, right? The other cool thing is the moment that you follow a company, for example, I followed First Draft, it gives you related companies under it. So it's saying, oh, if you're interested in First Draft, maybe you want to work for the European Observatory of something, for Google Digital News Initiative, or for Full Fact, or for the Bureau of Investigative Journalism. And you know what? Actually, all four of those places are places I'd like to work. Follow, 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 right? And it starts to build this network of how you're going to hear. It's like doing journalism, you guys. It's about cultivating your sources so that you have the right information that you need at the right time. Twitter. So one of the most helpful people you could ever follow on Twitter is this guy with his Twitter handle is @TheMediaMentor. So he tweets exclusively stuff about job opportunities, and they're categorized by days, and I forget how they go. So one day is radio jobs, another day is TV jobs, another day is internships, another day is like more copyrighty kind of PR-y stuff. And you can subscribe to alerts to his tweets. So after you follow someone, if you click on this little bell, the moment that he tweets, you get a little alert. And it might be the best way to like keep updated on your phone, so that if you see a cool job that you like, then you send it to yourself, right? Or you email it to yourself. So some of this is a little bit about doing a bit of curating job where you're going to subscribe to like 500 billion alerts, and maybe 70% of them have nothing to do with what you want to do, but they are worth wading through for the good stuff, right? So Twitter, for the UK specifically, this is one of the most useful Twitter accounts you're ever going to follow. The other thing you can do is follow people's lists. So when you're on someone's Twitter account, this is Press Pads, for example, and you click on these three little dots, it lets you view someone's lists. And people like me, or Journal Resources, or News Associates, or the NCTJ, or all these places have got Twitter lists of relevant people that might be of interest to you, whether because they tweet about jobs or because they're the commissioning editors or women in journalism, God knows what that you might be into, that you can then follow, or like all the fashion writers in the UK or whatever, right? So if you look for other people's lists and subscribe to them, then you don't have to start from scratch, right? You are already building on the work that they've already done, and working smart, not hard, right? So let me show you an actual example. Hold on a second. Where are the controls? for this thing. So let me share with you another of my screens. Share. Oh, that is 100% not the right screen that I wanted to share with you guys. Here you go. I hope you guys can see that. So, for example, if you come to my Twitter account and you go to lists, I have one list called Journo Jobs. And this list is my collection of 49 accounts that tweet about jobs in journalism and media in the UK. So you don't have to start from scratch, kids. All you need to do is find my list and subscribe. But you can find other people's lists or even make your own and share them with people, depending on what you're trying to get into, right? And this is a really good way of keeping track of what other people are tweeting. The other thing that is really important to do is something called Boolean searches. Do you know what Boolean searches are? So Boolean searches, and Amber, please send me a message on Slack if you're not seeing the right screen. You should be seeing the one that says online notepad. I sometimes get confused with Zoom and screens. Boolean search queries are a way of using a little bit of computer programming to narrow down what you're looking for, and to either to narrow down what you're looking for or to widen it out, right? And they work in this specific way. So let me go back to my slides because I actually have a better explanation of it there. Hold on a second. Share my screen. Go to this one. Share. So Boolean search queries are a way of, and this is stuff that I've learned from First Draft, and we use this to monitor disinformation online, and I'm going to teach you how to use it to find a job. So it's by using command words to search more effectively, and it works on Google, on Twitter, on YouTube, and LinkedIn, and you use capital words and, or, not, or minus to tell a computer what it is that you're looking for. So for example, to someone's question about how do I find people who are looking for pitches, I have built this little cute search query. So it's looking for the phrase, send me your pitches, or for the phrase, looking for pitches, or for the phrase, pitch me stories, or for the phrase, send pitches to this email, or for the phrase, looking for new voices, right? And you can build your own of what you want them to look for. But I can say, and paid, for example, if I wanted to find just stuff that people were putting out there that was guaranteed paid, right? Or internship or whatever. And you can combine these like you would maths at school, right? So let's try it. So if we go to Google, for example, and we're going to try it on Google, we're going to try it on Google Alerts, and we're going to try it on Twitter. So if I put that search string into Google, instead of having to search individually for all of those things, I can search for them all in one go. So for example, this says 20 high-paying magazines looking for pitches, how to pitch me stories to this particular guy, want to write about mental health, someone on Twitter, someone on BBC calling for new voices. And you can narrow these down even more if you come here towards settings. So I can change, for example, the language and say, you know what, just show me stuff in Spanish. I can change the tools and say, you know what, show me just results from the past month. I just want the fresh people calling for pitches. So for example, Vice contributors guideline for bitch media, open submissions for write or die tribe, Inkline online paid opportunity. This comes from Facebook, night things in submission. So see how you can start to find them a lot. This is about being smart with how you search, right? Boolean search queries. You can also put them into Google Alerts. So as long as you have a Google account of sorts, you can go to Google. Hold on a second, the internet's not working. You can go to Google Alerts, type in your Boolean search query and say, you know what, create an alert for this search and send me stuff at most once a day. So I only get one email with what you found with this search query. So again, you don't have to go and do 6 searches a day. You are making the internet do them for you, which is smart. And that's how you should work, right? Because you don't have time for this. You're going to be really busy making your CV and making other stuff. There's a question. Hold on a second. Yeah, right, April? And you can also do this on Twitter. So for example, if I come to Twitter, I can put in the search, the same Boolean query, And now, for example, Fanbyte is looking for pitches, Vittles is looking for pitches, Jessica Evans, who has an amazing newsletter, is writing about people who are looking for pitches. And if you want to be even smarter about it, for Twitter particularly, and again, because no one has time for this, guys, either you spend your life doing this or you come up with ways to making the internet work for you so you have time to actually do the things that matter to you. So we will definitely do another webinar on TweetDeck, but just for those of us who don't know it, so the way TweetDeck works is that it's a free web browser-based service that helps you classify Twitter in columns. So each of these columns have a different topic or a different thing that they're displaying. So for example, and it also lets you manage a couple of accounts. So with this one, I manage PressPat and Laura and a couple of other ones. But you can use them to add a column that looks for the thing that we're talking about. So for example, and also TweetDeck is super impressive if you ever show it in an office, because people kind of like, I'm going to overgeneralize, but over the age of 40, think this looks like the Matrix. And again, it's a gimmick, but sometimes it works, right? So I have a couple of search strings here at the end for columns. This one is looking for tweets that mention internships or unpaid or something like that, just to keep track of what people are tweeting around it. I have another one to look for tweets of people saying that the media is not diverse enough, or they're commenting on how we talk about being Black or being Asian or being BME, just to keep track again of that conversation. And I have made a column that includes that search query that I just wrote for you guys, so that it's constantly looking for new tweets that are about people asking for pitches. And you can build one to, for example, we could build one for jobs, right? So let's duplicate my slide and let's do it in the second one. So we can do looking for a job, or job alert, or new role, apply here. And it's just about thinking a little bit about the phrases that people use, right? So maybe I want to say, you know what, I really want to work in politics. So I'm going to use these and go and politics or political or political reporter. So it's going to look for anything that includes the phrase looking for a job, job alert, new role, or apply here, and any of these three other ones. So if I grab that and go back to TweetDeck, add a column for search. Oh, my internet's starting to die, you guys. Type that Boolean search query there. I now have a Twitter column, TweetDeck column, that is looking for tweets that are talking about hiring people to write in politics. And again, it just means that maybe you are the first one to find it. And some of the stuff that you'll find won't be perfect, and you might need to refine your Boolean search queries a little bit so that they're perfect. You're never going to get them right in one go. And you will know your part of the industry better than anybody else. But it's a really powerful way of making the internet work for you and owning it, right? Owning the fact that some people are going to advertise jobs first on Twitter than anywhere else. Owning the fact that you're going to have to be digitally native because that's probably what your first job in journalism is going to be about, right? And there's different ways to do this, for example, on to do little search queries for Instagram and for other platforms, which I can show you later. But for now, I think that's where I'm going to leave it. I'm just going to leave you guys with one last thing before I open it for questions again. So job hunting is hard, you guys. It sucks. And it doesn't get any better when you get older and when your career is, you're progressed. It just sucks for everybody. It's a weird process and it's awkward at parts. And I have never met a person who likes writing cover letters, but we kind of have to do it, right? And it's important to make sure that you don't let this process deflate you, because it's not you, it's the process. The process itself is hard, and that you should really dream big. So I'm not saying apply to be the news editor of Channel 4 News right now, but maybe apply for a job that you feel you fit 8 out of the 10 characteristics, right? Remember that a lot of the times we learn on the job, and also what they're looking for is an interesting colleague, right? And you also, something to remember about jobs. So if they're hiring, for example, for the junior political editor and there's a junior under that person, but they're not hiring for this role just yet. If they're hiring for this role, it means someone's moved, and it means that they're going to have to do some shifting up, right? and you don't know what internal politics and internal shiftings are happening in a company. So if you think, you know what, I'm a little bit underqualified for that job, I would still apply, because you never know what other roles are going to be opening up. And once you apply, you're already on people's minds, and they'll go like, oh, what about that girl who applied for the other job, right? And again, like, be humble and don't apply for the editor job if you're not even remotely close. But if you think you're almost qualified for a job, go for it, because you never know what other stuff people are considering when they're hiring. And I'm going to say this particularly loudly again for women and people of color and whatever. And I've done it myself in my own professional career, we won't apply for jobs. Statistically, it's been shown by research, until we tick absolutely every single one of the requirements and we feel 120% confident that we can do the job. And a lot of people will apply when they are 80% of the way qualified or 90% of the way qualified, and they will make up for it with enthusiasm or with creativity or with learning on the job or with thinking on their feet. We can do that too. So don't let that stop you. Dream really big, work really hard to back that up, and don't give up, right? Again, your first job is not going to be your dream job unless you're really lucky, but you might find your way there through a really interesting local publication or a local paper, and then do some radio and then some podcast and then write for a website and do some copywriting, and then eventually become the badass investigative reporter you wanted to be from the start, right? So in case you missed it, I'm also this is a QR code for my Twitter list for finding journo jobs. So you can point your phone at it and go and subscribe to it right there, or it's on my Twitter account. I'm going to open it up for questions, but I'm going to ask you that if you really enjoyed today's session, please tweet about it using the hashtag PressPadRemote and tag PressPad in it. We are going to try and do as many of these sessions as we can and get some more funding so we can run more of them. So if we can prove that you guys liked it, it's going to give us the ability to do more of these guys, and hopefully be there for you at what is a very complicated times for everybody. I'm going to open it up for questions again, so make sure you type them in there if you've got any, and I'll stick around until 9 o'clock, and then I think we should all go and get some dinner and go to bed, and particularly poor Ayo and Amber, who have been sticking around being my support and doing some excellent social media coverage. If you haven't seen what they've been doing on Twitter and Insta, you should. Question from Facebook. Mahika asks, how long should your CV be? I started journalism work experience since college first year, so I have internships and freelance work that runs 3 pages. Is that good? No, keep it to 2, and maybe group them. So maybe say like internships as one item, and then just have them as bullet points, all the places that you've been with some dates. There's always ways to condense that information down, but I would keep it strictly to 2 pages. So like if I print it out double-sided, it's just 1 piece of paper, right? Lauren reminded me that I was going to answer your question about LinkedIn etiquette. It is acceptable to add reach out to journalists and talent executives you don't know, but have careers you're interested in. I would say yes, Lauren, but not to everybody. And it's probably easier for people to reply to you on Twitter than on LinkedIn. For some reason, LinkedIn feels really like super serious and a little bit removed. So maybe start through Twitter and then work your way up to LinkedIn. But there's no shame in just reaching out to someone and being like, oh my God, I love your work. Could I take you out for a coffee? Or could we do, now that everyone's stuck at home, they don't have an excuse. Even if you don't live in the same city, right? You can say, can we do a Zoom call? I'd love to pick your brains, right? And sometimes just being really honest is refreshing to people, especially successful people, because most people will try to like sidestep into getting what they want. And if you just go, look, I think your boss, can I just ask you questions? I'd love to hear more about how you got to where you are. That's probably what most people want to know, but they just kind of go through the pretense of, oh, hi, how are you doing? I hope you're okay. I saw your latest article. I'd like to talk. Like, just get to it. I mean, don't be rude, obviously. Be nice and friendly and lovely, but just say what you mean. Madeline is asking, do you have tips on how to stand out when pitching articles when you don't have the industry experience or context behind you as much as other established freelancers? Are there any good publications that support young journals? So Madeline, I have absolutely no idea how pitching works because I've never been that kind of journalist. I've been a freelancer in terms of I work shifts or I am a producer on a show. My colleague Nicholas Lawson this is what she does for a job. This is her living. She pitches stories and she's a published journalist and she's brilliant. She is running a session on how to pitch like a pro. I can't remember the exact date, but it's definitely on our website. Tune in for that, because I'm just going to make stuff up and Nicola's the pro. So definitely tune into her. I'm sure she'll be able to share all the stuff that she's learned and the people that she knows about, right? Who else? Yes, and to Danny's point, journal resources is amazing articles and successful email pitches and lots of guidance on that kind of stuff. Any other questions, you guys, from anybody? Tweet about us, tell your friends, help us make some noise. I hope this has been really helpful. This recording is going to live on our Facebook account and on YouTube, like I said at the beginning. You know how to find me on Twitter now. Reach out. I live online, and I'd love to talk to you about the kind of stories that you guys have got. Little preview, we are planning a separate part of our coronavirus support to young journalists to try and help some young people publish their stories from their communities and how they're being affected by coronavirus. So 100% subscribe to our newsletter and follow us on Twitter to keep tracks of that, because it's going to be really exciting. And I'm not going to say any more, because otherwise I'm going to spoil the surprise. But we want to work with young journalists to help them get published and to tell the stories of their communities. So keep an eye out. Yeah, and we still got 32 people, woo, hanging on with us on Zoom. Beth on Facebook is asking, if you make small changes to your CV layout, should you email it to recruiters again, even if you only sent them your old one a few weeks ago? I wouldn't think so, Beth, unless they're like massive or like substantially changed. So for example, maybe the content hasn't changed, but you've substantially changed what your branding looks like, then yes. Otherwise, just make sure that it's updated on your LinkedIn and your Twitter and all these other places that people are going to look for you anyway, right? So I would say just do it like that. Any more, you guys? Happy to answer your questions. 27 people still on Facebook. Whoop, whoop. So I think we had, what was the highest number, Amber, at any given point on Facebook, just so we can do some adding? Because we had 57 on Zoom at the highest point, just to keep track of numbers. Ellen Halliday, who I think I actually know, hi Ellen, goes, how would you go about getting new shifts as a freelancer? Is it even possible right now, do you think? I think it is, Ellen. It's just a little bit harder. I would go about by crafting really smart Boolean search queries to find on Twitter who's calling for shifts. And maybe we can have a little think about the phrases that people would use to ask for. So like, I'm looking for people to cover shifts, looking for people to work nights or weekends or stuff like that. The wonderful thing is now you can do shifts from your own home. I think it's harder, but I don't think it's impossible. And shifts would go the same way. People tend to just put it on Twitter, and the first 5 people who reply are the ones who get the gig. Also talk to people who you know who are already on in news desks that normally hire freelancers. So for example, the Evening Standard, Metro, Huffington Post, all of those normally hire writing freelancers to cover shifts. So if you've got friends who are in, or you can reach out to journalists who are in there, they might tell you whether they're looking for stuff. And also think about, again, the side fringes and the satellite industries to journalism. So copywriting, web writing, writing for marketing, writing for social media, because you never know when that's going to be your into a bigger story or to a surprising job. So that's kind of how I would go about it. Georgina says she has a panel interview for the Journalism Diversity Fund later this week. Do you have any tips on demonstrating how you can bring diversity to a newsroom and how to show your commitment to journalism? Georgina, number one, that is an excellent fund. Good luck with your interview. Hope you do really well. Just be honest about who you are and what you like. You got an interview for a reason. Own that reason. Own that awesomeness. And it means that they've chosen you because you have a different story to tell. And think about what part of your story or your experience makes you stand out. Remember that some of the things that might be really obvious to you because they're part of your community are actually not that obvious to people outside, right? And they seem obvious to you because they're your immediate surroundings, but they're not obvious to everybody else. So for example, every once in a while I forget the things that I take completely for granted about Mexican culture are actually not common knowledge and would actually be a really interesting story that I can tell because I have access to that community, right? So for example, I've been thinking about writing, or just for myself to look into and write a story about how Mexican expats are dealing with not going home, the ones who have chosen to stay in the UK. And I can tell that story because I come from that community, and how we're trying to hold on to a little bit of normality by making sure we buy tortillas online or something like that, right? So remember that your community might feel super normal to you, but it's not everybody's experience, and you have the in and the cultural sensibility and the knowledge to tell those stories better than anybody else. Oh, April, good luck with your interview as well. So think about that. And again, your community might not be, it might just be a neighborhood, right? It might be a specific city. It might be a language. It might be a nationality. It might be a culture. It might be religion. It might be a fandom, right? So Ayo, who does our social and who's listening right now, is excellent. And he's really into, am I going to mess this up, Ayo? You're really into the Marvel universe and like video gamey, internet culture-y style kind of stuff, and has done some brilliant pieces of journalism because he has insights into these communities, right? Because he knows them. He knows the right questions to ask. He knows the right people to ask for interviews. So own that. Own those communities that you are a part of, whether they are offline or online, because those stories need telling, and who better to tell them than you, right? Let's see. Any more questions? Any more from Facebook, you guys, or from Zoom? I kind of feel like I've deserved a drink. I've earned myself a drink. Matt says, how important is it to commit wholly to one topic when it comes to making your journalistic brand? For instance, I really enjoy writing about politics, sport, and music, but fear that covering a wide range might hold me back. No, not at all, Matt. Not unless they start to become mutually exclusive. And also remember that a bunch of these have intersections. So some of the biggest stories in sport, for example, in the last couple of years have had to do with the intersections of sport and government, or sport and business, or sport and crime. Think about the doping scandals in athletics. Think about all of the business scandals that the Times uncovered, was it? About how the football stadiums were being built for the World Cup in Qatar. Or I don't know, in Mexico, we always get stories about the intersections of footballers and organized crime, or like sexual harassment and assault and all that kind of stuff. These different interests, if anything, equip you better to cover the stories where those intersections happen. And the real meaty stuff, the real human stories, the humanity of journalism is found in these intersections. No story is completely siloed. Politics is not about politics, it's about identity or power or money, right? Music is not about music, it's probably about identity and culture, and probably politics and power as well, right? So if anything, I think those make you stand out and make you better equipped. Just be really careful about the kind of stories that you write for each of them, so that they don't become contradicting, or that they don't close any doors for you in the future, right? But I don't think there's any problem with writing about different things. That's what you like and that's what you have expertise in. Go for it. We don't have any more questions from Facebook. Anybody else on Zoom, you guys? Any burning questions before we drop off? My cat has decided to completely excuse herself from this whole exercise. I'm really sorry. I did try and kind of like sit her next to me, but she was not cooperating. Well, I think we're going to wrap it up, you guys. Again, you know where to find me, particularly on Twitter, and you know where to find PressPad online. Please send us your thoughts. Tell your friends. We've got much more coming. My excellent colleagues, Olivia Crellin and Nicola, are doing the next couple sessions, and then we're going to start bringing more people and jazzing this up. Make sure you make noise about us on social so we can keep putting this program together. And we're in this for the long run. This isn't like a couple of weeks. We're in this until we're all back to some state of normality, and we're here to help. So let us know how we can help. It's been an absolute pleasure. I want to say thank you so much again to Ayo and Amber, who didn't have to sit through this, but they did, just because I was like a little bit nervous and falling apart earlier. Follow them, follow their amazing work on our social channels and our websites. And I'm going to go get a drink. You guys go wash your hands and have a lovely evening. See you later.